Okay. This time, I'll call to order the East Hempfield Township zoning hearing boards, the special meeting that was recessed from March. In case number. What is case number? Case number 2476. And members of the board who are present this evening, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Lewis, Kyle, Mr. Bingham, and myself. We also have with us a board reporter taking minutes. We're also taking board minutes. We also have with us our legal counsel, Jason Hess. We have, and we'll continue with this special hearing this evening. There is no other business that will come before this board. So also, this board will hear the case in an informal manner without strict compliance with rules, procedure used in a court trial. We ask the applicant and any individuals interested in this case to step in front of the table and explain the circumstances involved in their application. Applicants may present their case themselves through their attorneys or other representatives. My fellow board members and I, as well as our solicitor, may ask the applicant questions from time to time during the applicant's presentation or at its conclusion. All persons having an interest in the application will be given the opportunity to ask questions, to offer evidence on their own, and inform the board of their position on the matter. In the interest saving time, we will swear in everyone at this time. Even if you were sworn in at the previous meeting, I would ask at this time that you rise. Okay, under penalties of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So please say I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Also, for the record, just so everyone knows, not only are we in person, but we're also virtual. As of now, I don't see anybody on there. Okay, at this time, when you all rise, please want to slide.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This property has been posted and advertised in accordance with the sunshine law and the MPC.
It has been.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm just also asked, since this is a resumed hearing, if the resumption of the hearing was posted in the lobby and the NPC. Yes.
Yes,
And also on the website.
yes.
Gentlemen, received draft copy at this point of the minutes from the previous hearing, which was conducted in March. I have a motion to, or is there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a slight change. I was present on Zoom, but I was not physically present. I could hear everything that was said during the meeting, but I wasn't able to respond. Somebody heard when I said anything, which is okay. It's probably best, but I was able to follow everything.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, gentlemen? If not, can I have a motion to approve the board minutes of the special meeting in March with the correction so stated.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kyle, second by Mr. Lewis. Any discussion, gentlemen? Seeing none.
Excuse me, can we make sure that we get closer to the mic because we do have someone taking minutes now for us. That's on Zoom. Thank you.
Okay, so just for the board's information, the Judy that's up on the screen is the individual that this township has hired to take the board minutes. With that, Beth, do you want to call the case up, please? Oh, we didn't vote yet. All in favor of the approving the draft minutes of the March meeting with the correction? Mr. Hanson.
In favor.
Mr. Lewis.
In favor.
Mr. Kyle.
In favor.
Mr. Bingham.
In favor.
And I'll also vote in favor. The minutes have been approved. Okay, Beth, would you like to call the case up, please?
Case number 2476, Colbrook Associates Venture LLC filed a substantive validity challenge pursuant to section 916.1A1 of the PA Municipalities Planning Code relating to its property at Timby Way, parcel number 290-51654-00000, located in the medium density residential zone, claiming the zoning ordinance unlawfully excludes high density multifamily dwellings.
Okay. Is someone here from Colbrook Associates Venture LLC or their legal counsel again?
Yes, good evening. Brian Nagel here on behalf of the applicant.
Is there anyone in the audience that wants, excuse me, anyone in the audience or on Zoom that wants to be a party to this case? Seeing them, we will continue. Mr. Nagel, you had the floor when we adjourned or recessed the last meeting.
Thank you. Good evening. We're here this evening just to continue with the testimony of Dr. Cassidy. I have a couple of.
Okay. Judy, are you picking up Mr. Nagel?
The microphones don't go through the audio system, that you won't hear them, but they do go through Zoom.
Okay,
Yes, I am.
thank you.
Where?
Sorry to interrupt you, just wanted to make sure for the minutes. Well, okay. Judy, is that your hand up for a question?
No, that's just this.
Already a question. Why are you doing this? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Nagel, I'll let you start again and hopefully it won't interrupt you.
Nope, thank you. I have a microphone with a green light, which I assume means that it's on. If I notice that green light going any other color, I will let you know. Just a couple of housekeeping items. When last we were together, we had marked an exhibit marked A14, and that is the East Hempfield Township Comprehensive Plan. The township's solicitor had noted that there were some circles on some of the maps that Dr. Cassidy had put on there. And I've updated that exhibit to not include those circles. So it's actually an official copy of the township's 2016 comprehensive plan. And I provided a copy of that to the township solicitor. We also for exhibit A11, we had the E-code version of the East Hempfield Township zoning ordinance we've updated that with an official copy of the East Hempfield Township zoning ordinance of 2014 as A11. And I've provided a copy of that to the township solicitor.
Did you, so you did not hand out an exhibit 11, at the previous hearing, correct?
Correct. I believe, if I recall correctly, I just marked it by reference as a copy of the township's zoning ordinance.
Okay, and because I just wanted to make sure that the exhibits I have are A1 through, one through eight. I'm sorry, A1 through A10, and then there A12 are the exhibits that I have. Those are the only ones that were handed out previously.
Very well. I'll mark A11, which is an official copy of the township zoning ordinance.
Sure, Cheryl gets copies of everything.
I gave her one.
Okay.
Which we received from the township. I'd just like to note for the record, obviously the hearing is being transcribed by the court reporter. I noted that the board adopted its minutes from the last meeting of this proceeding this evening, correct?
We adopted, excuse me, the board minutes, not the official transcript minutes.
Understood. So I just wanted to note for the record that two things. One, I haven't had an opportunity to review those minutes. And two, I think we all would acknowledge that the transcript is the record of this hearing,
Yes,
not the board minutes.
no, board minutes are to meet the requirements of the sunshine law that the board keep minutes of any board, governing board or its sub-board agencies keep minutes of what the proceedings are. The board minutes are not a word for word computation. It is basically what happened, who was present, meet the requirements of the law, when the meeting was held, time in the meeting was held, who was present from the board, any person that spoke in the subject matter. So our board minutes meet the requirements of the sunshine law.
Thank you. I still have a fair bit of testimony from Dr. Cassidy. I don't anticipate that we will finish his direct testimony and his cross-examination this evening. So I'm expecting that either I'll finish the direct or get very close, and maybe we'll have time for some cross-examination, but I'm planning to have Dr. Cassidy back at the May meeting. And then I have the next two witnesses planned for the June meeting, as much as I can get in between those witnesses. So if by chance we finish with Dr. Cassidy's testimony this evening, my request would be that the next hearing would be in June, not May, because that's when I'll have those next two witnesses. We'll have to see how it goes, but I just wanted to give you kind of an advance heads up of where we are.
I don't think there's any issue here.
No, I don't have an
Township has
objection.
no problems.
No.
Okay, that's fine. Just even tonight, though, remember that one of the rules of this board that was adopted years ago is that we conclude testimony by 11 o'clock.
Understood. And I had conferred with the township solicitor about that issue beforehand. So if we're not going to finish, I may not even ask to go that long. We'll see where we are. In addition, I consulted with the township or spoke with the township solicitor about the exhibits. I asked the township solicitor to give me a list of any exhibits that she might have an objection about. And all the other exhibits would be stipulated to, and we'll address that at the next time we're together. So with that, I'll recall Dr. Cassidy. I have one request for the board, if I may.
Yes.
I've tried to lay my questions of Dr. Cassidy out in sort of a logical format and order as best I can. And so to the extent you can hold your questions until I'm finished, that would be helpful. So I don't get off on other areas, because what ends up happening is if part of something I'm going to cover gets covered in some questions, but I'm going to get to that topic, then I end up having to go back over it where it wasn't fully covered. So it just makes it a little easier if I can get through everything as much as possible.
I will keep that in mind. The only thing that, where we would differ from that is if something is said that we don't understand, it would be better to have it corrected at that time than wait till the end of our Cassidy's testimony.
That's fair, and I understand that, and I agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Dr. Cassidy, as I understand.
Just a thing here, just trying to lock the back of this chair. Sorry about that.
You testified last time that East Hempfield Township, together with other member municipalities of the Lancaster Intermunicipal Committee, adopted a multi-municipal regional comprehensive plan called Growing Together, a comprehensive plan for central Lancaster County. Is that right?
That's correct.
When did the township adopt Growing Together as its comprehensive plan?
April of 2007.
And where are you getting that date?
That is on page 3 of the township's comprehensive plan, and it's also right in the front of Growing Together as well. It lists the adoption date for the by East Hempfield Township.
And that's A13 that you just referred to, the Growing Together.
Correct.
Are you familiar with the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code?
Yes.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A22 for identification.
Thank you.
And that's marked at the top, 53 PS 10301, section 10301. Is that what you would know as section 301 of the municipalities planning code?
It is.
And referring specifically to section A 2.1. What does Article 3, Section 2.1 provide?
Okay, so this section 301 is the requirements for preparation of a comprehensive plan. And so 301A, just to start there, is the comp plan must include but not be limited to following these elements. So then now on 2.1, and that says a plan to meet the housing needs of present residents and those individuals and families anticipated to reside in the municipality, which may include conservation of presently sound housing, rehabilitation of housing in declining neighborhoods, and the accommodation of expected new housing in different dwelling types and at appropriate densities for households of all incomes.
In your opinion, is providing appropriate density for multifamily housing part of what is required to meet the housing needs of existing and future residents of the township?
Yes. And the reason that the reference is there about density and different dwelling types is because it's assumed that in order to serve all families and all different income levels, that you cannot, you can't do that just with one density type or one building type. So you have to have a variety of densities that can provide for that.
Did Growing Together discuss and make any recommendations about the provision for multifamily dwellings and its preferred density in the member municipalities?
Yes. So starting, so Growing Together again is it's the intermunicipal comprehensive plan. And so that plan, in terms of its overall strategy, they looked at the amount of land that was available and in the areas that were appropriate for development. And they said, okay, you know, we have to have a strategy for the future. And so based on that, they made a recommendation of 6.5 to 12 dwelling units per acre, and that would be the average gross density. That's not peak density, that's an average gross density. And the higher range would be accommodated with those areas and municipalities which fall within the both, in their case, it's the designated growth area, but that designated growth area overlaps with the township's growth area as well. And so yeah, that's.
I'm going to show you an exhibit marked A35 for identification.
Thank you.
Can you identify that document?
Yes, so it's 2 pages. And they are excerpts from Growing Together. And the first page is page 6.5. And the next page is 7.1.
Does that include an analysis of the amount of land that gets used depending on the densities that are implemented through planning and zoning?
Yeah, so this is page 6.5. there's a table 6.4 at the top, and then there's this table 6.5. Table 6.4, they start out by identifying the amount of what they term as buildable land, which is 7,896 acres. And then they go on to look at what the demand is going to be for accommodating future projected population growth. And so then they go down to table 6.5 and they report those acres, the 7,896 acres, and they look at the impact of using densities to accommodate that need, ranging from 5.5 to 16. And what it shows is that, of course, you know, the higher the density, the less land that is used up, so to speak, in order to accommodate the necessary growth. And so based on this, that's where they came up with this 6.5 to 12 dwelling units per acre in order to try to make sure that the development could be placed in the most appropriate areas and be able to preserve farmland and the like.
So if I understand table 6.5, based on what you're saying, just correct me if I'm wrong. At the bolded portion where it says gross residential density, in the first column under 5.5, and then it goes 6, 6, 5, 7, 7.5, 8, and all the way up to 16. This is showing that as you increase the density, you reduce the amount of land that you need to accommodate the housing units. Is that right?
That is correct. So in that table, at the top, as you just noted there, it lists this range of gross residential density. But then down below that, there's another bolded heading that says remaining buildable land in 2030. And there, that lists, these are acreages. And so it lists acreages starting at 805, that's associated with the 5.5 dwelling units per acre at the low end. And then the higher the density gets, at 16, all the way at the other end of the spectrum, there's a remaining 5,459. And so that's why they did this. This is all part of their like macro strategy where they're saying, okay, look, we have to accommodate population growth and the demands of our region as it grows. So if we're not going to just have a kind of sameness and use up all the land, then we're going to have to use density as a tool to be able to be more strategic about where they would focus development.
And then the second page of A35 talks about, I guess, goals for housing. Is that right?
That's correct. This is, so section 6 the page 6.5 is from section 6 of that document, which is land use. And then 7.1 is the beginning of the next section, section 7, which is housing. And so they, it's important to point out that just a moment ago, we were, I just was referring to the municipality's planning code and the requirements for accommodating, a range of housing types and all different incomes. So this goal starts out by saying affordable, diverse housing choices across all income ranges will be made available to encourage homeownership, rental properties, and to further smart growth. So they're trying to they're trying to, address that.
So in terms of the recommended densities that you were testifying about earlier, did East Hempfield Township adopt the recommended density in its latest zoning ordinance?
It did not.
When was the current township zoning ordinance, which I marked and identified earlier, the township ordinance 2014-06, when was that adopted?
That was adopted August 6th, 2014.
Before the township adopted that zoning ordinance, the 2014 zoning ordinance, did it revise its comprehensive plan that was in effect at the time that the 2014 zoning ordinance was adopted?
No, the current comprehensive plan, the township's current comprehensive plan, is, the 2016 comprehensive plan, and that was adopted on June 1st of 2016.
So the comprehensive plan that was in effect at the time that the 2014 zoning ordinance was adopted was growing together.
That's correct.
You previously testified last time, I believe, about the subsequently adopted Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, Places 2040.
That's correct.
When was Places 2040 adopted?
October 24th, 2018 by the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners.
Well, excuse me, what was that date again?
October 24th, 2018.
Thank you.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A20A. Can you identify that document?
Yes, this is page actually from Places 2040, and it is page 48. And the heading at the top says the big ideas, and then below that, growing responsibly.
Does Places 2040 make any conclusions about anticipated population growth in Lancaster County?
It does. So again, similar to the Growing Together comprehensive plan, the county began by identifying what the challenge ahead was. And in this case, it was that census data shows that there's anticipated that there will be up to 100,000 additional people in Lancaster County by 2040. And so they start out by identifying that as the challenge ahead. And so from that point, once you say, okay, I've got to accommodate that growth, then the challenge becomes where and how to best accommodate it. So this is at the front end of their whole process that they're trying to define, you know, what they need to address.
Does the township's 2016 comprehensive plan include projections for anticipated population growth in East Hempfield Township?
It does.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A23 for identification. Can you identify this document?
Yes, this is actually, this is an exhibit that I prepared. And, it's entitled Population Projections, East Hempfield Township. And this, the source of this is from the, 2010 US Census, and then also projection by the Lancaster County, Planning Commission that was done in 2012. And these are the same sources that are cited by the township's comprehensive plan. And what this shows is that from 2010 to 2040, that there's a projected number of increase of people in East Hempfield Township of 6,695. And that over that full period of time, from 2010 to 2040, that would represent a 28.46% increase in the overall population. And, you know, in East Hempfield, also among the, you know, it's, let's just say, pure townships that, you know, and have the same relationship to city of Lancaster and road networks and growth, then this would make East Hempfield be fourth in the region in terms of that overall population growth.
Is there vigorous economic development ongoing in and around East Hempfield Township?
Definitely. Oh, sorry about that. Well, yes. There's been, based on the road networks and the regional, there's been a lot of regional growth throughout the area. And you can see it all along the Route 30 and Route 33 corridors. And since the central portion of East Hempfield is situated within that, that wedge, if you will, between those road networks, it's resulted in a lot of development and growth.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked 824 identification. Can you please identify that document?
Yes. Again, it's an exhibit that I created, and it's entitled Holbrook Site Proximity to Commercial Corridors and Centers of Holbrook being the subject property, multi-family residential community. And so you'll notice on here that there are highlighted, there are the two primary regional road networks, which are routes 282 and 30. And when you see them, starting from the right side of the image and going to the left, they fan out and form a wedge-shaped area. Holbrook is situated within that area, but in addition, I just selected some other large facilities to highlight the fact that this is an area where there's a lot of employment centers, there's a lot of services, and obviously, you know, like an area where they've seen a lot of growth. So I'm just going to refer down to the legend here. And so you'll see on the map in red, there are numbers 1 through 6 on there. So starting in the upper left, number 1 is the Penn State Medical Center. Number 2 is the Kellogg Company. Number 3 is the large logistics and distribution center that's actually located nearby here. And that's approximately 920,000 square feet. The Penn Medicine, Lancaster General Health Campus, the Park City Mall, which is it's 1,443,000 square feet. And then, although it's outside of the township, the shops at Belmont, which is another 365,000 square feet of retail and restaurants and what have you. And so all of these are showing this pattern of growth and development that's occurring between the Route 30 and Route 283 wedge, as I refer to it, and then, you know, extending eastward toward the city.
Is it fair to say that you used a current or recent Google Earth image to create this?
Oh, yes, excuse me. So yes, this is, the source of the image was taken from Google Earth. And then the locations, in terms of where I've keyed in the numbers, those are also, you know, those were also, identified and located, by using that same, the same Google Earth, software.
In other words, you identified the six places you identified in the legend, and then you located them on this map
That's correct.
with the numbers that you identified.
That's correct.
Does the regional highway system affect the township's development?
Definitely, because what is occurring is that this is a regional road network. These aren't local roads. And so you're talking about really bringing a lot of people through the township, into the township. That's caused, again, all this development also provides for jobs and services, and infrastructure. And so this becomes a logical place where people then want to go because they work near here, and or they shop near here or recreate or whatever the case might be. And so it just increases, again, with more jobs and more services. That's just going to further increase the demand in the township.
And there's an area on your exhibit A24 between two roadways. I believe they're 280. Is that 283 or 282?
I'm sorry, it's 283. That is, my apologies, that is mislabeled.
Well, it looks like the top one, the little white tag on your map says 283. I just noticed that the caption says 282, but that's 283. Is that right?
My apologies.
And
it is 283.
And then the one below that, it's in between 283. The one below that is Route 30, correct?
Correct.
And then in between that, there's a pizza basically shaped area. That's where you've identified most of the development that's listed on your legend, correct?
Correct. It's that wedge that is that falls between those major regional road networks. And it happens that also happens to be really the central portion of East Hempfield Township.
And Dr. Cassidy, are routes 283 and 30 part of what you were referencing as the regional highway system?
Yes.
I am showing you two documents, one marked A15 for identification and the other marked A16 for identification.
Yes,
Can you identify those documents, please?
yes, so, A15, is, has the heading of major roads and travel volumes. And this is, map that was, or excuse me, table sourced from PennDOT. And again, showing here, while the exhibit A24 that I had just been referring to, I only highlighted, Route 30 and 283 on it just because they're such major roadways. This also shows other, major roads that are within the township. And so, what you see here is that, Route 30, has 110 to 150,000, vehicular trips a day. 283 is 60 to 61,000. And then, we get down to some of the not, roads that aren't as big, but still, substantial roads. Principal artery, PH 72, 13,000 to 18,000 trips a day. 462, 11,000 to 15,000. PH 23, 10,000 to 11,000 trips a day. 772, 13,000, and 741 has 15,000 to 19,000 trips per day. So those are all what we would consider to be fairly high traffic volumes.
And are those all roads that are located in and around East Hempfield Township or the road region that you were referring to?
Yes,
And your source for this information, is it as listed on A15, a PennDOT source of some type?
yes.
What would that be?
It's the 2021 AADT traffic volume.
Can you tell us what A16 is?
Yes, A16 this is the East Hempfield Township official map, roads and transportation focus map. And again, this just shows the road network within the township.
Does the Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, Places 2040, identify an urban growth area that includes part of East Hempfield Township?
Yes, it does.
And I presume that would be an area that's planned for continued growth and development?
So again, back to places 2040, we were just referring to that a couple minutes ago. So exhibit A20A, we had been referring to earlier, is from places 2040. And as I was explaining, this identifies population growth and the expectation of as many as 100,000 new people, living within the county. And so then, as part of their macro strategy, you know, which is what happens when people start a planning process, is that they were looking at what they needed to accommodate, and then they said, okay, what makes sense in terms of how we're going to do this? And so one of the concepts that they created was this notion of the urban growth area. And the reason for that is because we were just talking about the road networks and the goods and services, job opportunities, and, you know, employment centers. That with all of that, the greatest concentration of those services and all that infrastructure is situated within this area that's the urban growth area. And so it became a focus for them to create this areas, because they thought that's where the greatest concentration of future development should be focused.
I'm showing you another excerpt from Places 2040, Mark A20B. That's a 3-page exhibit. Could you explain what that covers?
Or then you'll be identify this.
Yeah, please.
So, so again, this is also describing places, from Places 2040, and, it's 3 pages. It's page 51, 52, and 53. And so this is, this again is part of the big strategy, again, where they're trying to figure out what's our, you know, again, there's always the details in any process, what you do, but this is when you're trying to lay out the macro strategy on how do you want to tackle this problem. And so on page 51, they start out by saying, you know, what do we need to do different? And so there are 4 headings listed here, and so the first one is grow where we are already growing. And so that's this idea that I was just talking about a moment ago, that we should focus the development within those areas where we have the infrastructure and the services. And so their recommendation here is that 85% of new dwelling units should be situated within urban growth areas. Because again, they cite that there's already infrastructure and services there, and we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, we should be efficient. The next heading is prioritize redevelopment and infill urban growth areas. And so again, building on that same theme, leverage previous investment by building areas already served by sewer, water, and transportation. Create incentives for developers to convert underutilized properties to new areas and make more efficient use of smaller vacant lots in urban areas. The next settings is at the top right here. Manage the use of large tracts of vacant land in urban areas. So what they're saying here is not only is land a scarce resource to begin with, but large tracts of land are a very scarce resource. And so we should really make sure that we're taking advantage of them to try to make sure that we get the best benefit out of them that we can. And so they recommend defining these as growth opportunity areas and reserve them for for the most intense development, and then limit large lot suburban development in rural areas. And again, this is part of the goal is if we're going to keep 85% of the new dwelling units within the urban growth area, then we want to also have policies and goals that are going to, not encourage, growth outside of those urban areas. So those are all big, the big picture, ideas about what we need to do differently. That's page 51. And then page 52. It was that this idea that we need to build more compactly and more efficiently. And this is, this shows the, urban growth, areas, that for the county and has the recommended, target average, densities, versus dwelling units per acre, within those different areas. And you'll notice that the area that is the kind of salmon color that surrounds central Lancaster County on that graphic, that is recommended to have an average density of 9 dwelling units per acre. And then finally, page 53. This is just, this is kind of their do's and don'ts list of just macro strategies for what should happen inside the urban growth area and outside the urban growth area. And as you read through these, they're just, again, they're trying to target and focus development within the urban growth area and to discourage further development outside the urban growth areas. So that's the summary of it.
You testified earlier about the urban growth area that's identified in the township's comprehensive plan. That would be the 2016 comprehensive plan.
That's correct.
Is that area, that urban growth area identified in the township's comprehensive plan, generally consistent with what Places 2040 identified as the urban growth area within East Hempfield Township?
It is.
How much of East Hempfield is located within the county's urban growth area, if you know?
It's approximately 2/3. So we did some, we actually did a takeoff in using geographic information system, and it was 66%. So that is 2/3.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A30. I think they're going to refer you back to what was previously marked as A10. And just to note, with respect to what was previously marked A10, that does have the dotted line circle that you had added to show where the Colebrook site generally is located, correct?
That's correct. There's as part of our, when we handed these out before, part of our analysis was when we were just looking at all of this material, to make sure that we could, have some frame of reference where the Colbert site was situated. We had put these dashed circles, in the same spot on each of the maps because, sometimes you can get into the story. So.
And can you identify what A30 is?
A30 is an excerpt from the East Hempfield Township Comprehensive Plan of 2016, and it is page 19.
What are the key objectives of the township's urban growth area?
At the top of page 19, there's a reference to map 8, which is exhibit A10 that we were just referring to a moment ago. And so this is the description for that provided in the township's 2016 comprehensive plan. It says this map shows the areas of the township within the Lancaster County urban growth area. The urban growth area is the area delineated for higher density development with a mix of uses as opposed to areas outside of the urban growth area, which are encouraged to remain for lower density development as well as rural and agricultural uses. So that as a strategy is consistent with the idea that I was just talking about relative to Places 2040, with this idea that there's an intention to focus growth and development within the urban growth area.
Are the densities of 5 dwelling units per acre that are permitted in the 4 East Hempfield Township zoning districts where multifamily dwellings are permitted within the range of multifamily densities recommended by the Lancaster Intermunicipal Committee Regional Comprehensive Plan Growing Together?
They are not. They're substantially lower, as I just testified a moment ago. The Growing Together is recommending average densities of 6.5 to 12, with the notion that within the urban growth area, that the land situated within that area should be at the higher limit of that range, so closer to 12.
Are those,
And that's an average density.
understood, are those East Hempfield Township densities consistent with the densities that were recommended by Places 2040?
No, again, Places 2040 is recommending within that area an average density, residential density of 9 dwelling units per acre. So again, the reason I keep emphasizing average is because it's not about what's on an individual property, it's about being able to achieve that overall. And if you go back to, may I refer back to another?
Sure.
So what you're saying, okay, I'm referring back to A35, which is page 6.5 from Growing Together. So again, what this is just showing is that if you're going to be able to preserve these, preserve other lands, then you have to you have to start out with getting the densities higher to begin with. And what the current patterns in the county are that you have, average densities that are below 5 dwelling units per acre. And so when you start trying to get to a point where you want to achieve averages that are 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, these amalgamating the ranges between places 20, 40 and growing together, that in order to do that, you have to have a higher level to make that average happen.
Does the township's 2016 comprehensive plan make recommendations with respect to density that are similar to the recommendations made by Growing Together and by Places 2040?
No. There are not, unlike the Places 2040 and Growing Together, the township's 2016 comprehensive plan does not lay out an objective strategy, so to speak. They didn't take the population and say, okay, fine, we only have, this much land, we're going to get densities that are higher. In order to be able to achieve that, there are not recommendations, that are expressed in, higher dwelling units per acre in the plan.
Does the township's 2016 comprehensive plan specify a planning rationale for the multifamily density limitations that are found in the township's 2014 zoning ordinance?
No. The only recommendations that are given are just, again, looking at infill development and sort of continuing the same patterns.
Did you conduct an analysis relative to the township's provision for multifamily housing?
I did.
And did that analysis include an evaluation of the present level of growth and development in East Hempfield Township?
Yes.
And what factors did you consider in that evaluation?
Well, again, like the other plans that we were just talking about a moment ago, you should always be looking at projected population growth and the availability of services, employment centers, proximity to transportation networks, infrastructure. All of those factors are what drive a good plan.
Would those factors include commercial development?
Yes.
What's the significance of the East Hempfield Township's growth? What's the significance of East Hempfield Township's growth?
Well, again, the significance of it is that if I may, I'm gonna refer back to it. So again, just looking back at A24, which illustrates again this wedge that I described previously, that is formed by routes 283 and 30, and some of the significant facilities and infrastructure that are located within that area. These are places that are going to continue to drive demand for housing in this area.
Did you conduct an analysis of the township's 4 districts that allow multifamily by right in East Hempfield Township?
Yes,
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A36 for identification. Could you please identify that document?
yes, this is a 2-page document that I prepared. It's entitled East Hempfield Township Multifamily Residential Zoning District Analysis.
And can you explain your analysis as fleshed out on A36?
Yes, and I'll just ask everybody to, bear with me as we go through this, because it gets a little complicated, but I'll try to, if I lose anyone, please, don't hesitate to let me know. So again, it started out and, looking just at the township's ordinance in general. And so identified, the 4 districts where multifamily residential is, permitted use. And I identified those actually at the last, at the last hearing. But those are the RM district BC, the VR, BC, and CBC. And I'm going to be talking about that more in a minute. The RM, VR, and BC districts permit a maximum density of 5 dwelling units per acre, and the CBC has a maximum density of 4 dwelling units per acre. And so when I looked at those, I thought it was, I thought it was a little curious that they were all in that 4 or 5 dwelling units per acre range. And so I then went and looked at what the intent statements and what the purpose, was that was established for each of these 4 districts in the ordinance. And so see, okay, do they all have the same purpose, or are they different? Like, why do we, shouldn't we differentiate between them? So RM, which is the medium density residential zone, on here, the first bullet point is this is an excerpt. It's section 270-3.6A from the East Hempfield Township zoning ordinance. It says a statement of intent. This zone provides opportunities for medium density housing, offering a range of housing types, sizes, and permits ancillary businesses that service existing and new neighborhoods. Such neighborhoods should include or be close, should be close in close proximity to recreational lands and shall be served by public infrastructure. And so, while there are some business, ancillary business uses that are permitted within that district, overall, it's clearly intended to be, primarily a residential district. The next one, second bullet point down, VR district, which is the village residential zone. And here again, there's an excerpt from the ordinance, which is section 270-3.7A, statement of intent. This zone strives to enhance and protect existing traditional village residential areas in East Hempfield Township. The VR zone encourages a mix of housing types. High priority is given to maintaining the village's existing historic and cultural character. So this has again, it's primarily a residential zone, but here we're talking about something that has a a different character. And so part of our analysis was also, I didn't just look at the ordinance, but then I started again going back to tools like Google Earth and looking at aerial photography and looking at parcel maps and just trying to understand and just came out and drove around and looked at the neighborhoods. And when you see these areas, you start to realize that, these areas that are within this with village residential, they're smaller scale and there aren't that many big lots. And so the scale of development that's going to, be able to be achieved in these areas appropriately, it's going to be of a smaller scale. The next bullet point, BC Village Center Zone. Again, quoting here from the zoning ordinance, section 270-3.8A, statement of intent. This zone recognizes East Hempfield Township's original residential, commercial, and mixed-use settlement pattern within its village setting. This established pattern of development includes higher intensities of development that integrates a mix of business and residential uses, and the village center zone provides opportunities for redevelopment, infill, and reuse of existing, particularly historic structures. And so, again, now this, as I look closer at this zone, it's got a different character zone because again, it's got more of a commercial feel to it than the VR district does. And again, smaller scale properties that would be available for redevelopment, and against the historic structures that could be adaptively reused. CBC, this is the fourth bullet point down, community business center zone. The quoting here and section 270-3.9A, statement of intent. This zone provides East Hempfield Township residents with major goods and services at a size and scale that is appropriate with surrounding neighborhoods. The zone represents existing and new business areas in the township that are contiguous to the township's major corridors in the designated growth area. And just so for clarity here, and for a second interject, designated growth area is a term in this case that is used in growing together, and designated growth area is part of an urban growth area as well. So it's saying, within these designated growth areas in East Hempfield Township's comprehensive plan, these areas have the carrying capacity to accommodate moderately sized business activities. A major organizing feature of these business areas is the roadway corridor. Therefore, design features of the corridor to provide streets that accommodate motorized and non-motorized vehicular and pedestrian traffic, and parking in safe, efficient, and attractive manner is of paramount importance. The zone provides opportunity for live-work arrangements in multi-use structures. So again, here is a situation where this district does allow for multifamily uses as a permitted use, but that it's not, I would not characterize that as being primarily a residential district. But it is one of the permitted uses there. So the bottom here I'm saying that the excerpts, these excerpts illustrate the differences in the intended purposes of the 4 districts. And that the RM and VR districts are characterized as predominantly residential districts. And accommodate some ancillary commercial institutional uses, but the VC and CBC districts, I would characterize as being predominantly commercial districts. And so it starts to become this differentiator in my mind, where for VC and CBC, you're really thinking about that more as accommodating infill residential uses, and again, some adaptive reuse, but it's not a place where I would think you would be able to accommodate a lot of future residential development, multifamily residential development. So from a planning perspective, it's reasonable to assume that these 4 districts would have dramatically different residential zoning standards to allow for different dwelling types and appropriate densities for households of all incomes to be required. Top page 2. And so the VC and CBC districts, should have residential standards that are tailored for small scale, for infill, and they do currently. They respectively have their densities are at 5 dwelling units and 4 dwelling units per acre. And so, but this notwithstanding, all of the RM, the VR and VC districts all have the same permitted density of 5 dwelling units per acre, and CBC has a permitted density that, again, of 4. But then ironically, it's the district that permits the largest building footprint, or the maximum building area. So, you can in theory make a bigger building, but you have a lower permitted density. So again, these things don't seem to be in sync with one another. The VR district is composed primarily of single-family homes, many of which are historic in a traditional neighborhood pattern, and thus, while the multifamily residential is a permitted use, the actual opportunities are limited predominantly to the conversion of large historic houses into and existing historic commercial buildings. So you could take a big house and you could, and you see this, you can see where people have done this, take a large house and turn it into, a few apartments, or you can take, again, an old commercial building. But in terms of opportunities for really developing multifamily residential at any kind of scale, there's not a lot of potential there. And so between the limitation of the 5 dwelling units per acre, you've got these infill opportunities and then within the VR district, that maximum allowable building area, the footprint of the building, that is also limited to 5,000 square feet and a maximum building height of 35 feet.
And just to follow up on 2 points you made about the maximum building area. You're saying that's the maximum building area in both cases that you've identified in these different districts, the 15,000, the 10,000, the 5,000. That's under the zoning ordinance?
Yes, this is all within the zoning ordinance. And I'll get into all of this more later. This is just my high level.
Okay, you can continue. I just wanted to clarify.
Overview, and
I just wanted to clarify that point.
No problem. But it's, and again, my apologies. I know this is a lot of stuff to digest here, but it's a complicated issue. So, the RM district is characterized as predominantly a residential district and includes, the largest parcel sizes and the greatest concentration of existing multifamily residential dwellings, in the township today. And, so it's rational and reasonable that this district, would provide the highest residential density, as well as, the commensurate area bulk standards to enable the construction of new multifamily residential housing, which conform to, contemporary economic and market conditions. And what I mean by that is that when you're talking about taking old, an existing historic house or some historic building, you have to take the space that's available to you. And when you're trying to create, if you're trying to create an apartment there. And so, a lot of times, you have to make compromises. And so what you're left with is something that doesn't really meet what would be considered, a contemporary market standard in terms of just sizes of spaces and all kinds of facilities that you expect. And so, but despite this, the density is still at 5 dwelling units per acre, which is the same as for the VR and BC districts. So this didn't make sense. So none of the permitted residential densities are high enough to enable East Hempfield Township to achieve, either the 9 dwelling unit, the average 9 dwelling units, average density recommended by Places 2040, or the 6.5 to 12 dwelling units, again, being more at the high end of that scale because we're within the urban growth area, recommended by Growing Together. And so, again, it's a one size fits all kind of approach. And so if, for example, if 5 dwelling units per acre is the appropriate infill density for some of the small existing lots, there might be a leftover vacant lot within the neighborhood that never got built, or somebody can subdivide a small portion of their property nested within these existing neighborhoods. Then the larger parcels that are situated by all the infrastructure and facilities within the township and the RM district, that they're going to need to provide for densities that are in the 12 to 16 dwelling units per acre in order to achieve the necessary target average. And I'm citing here of 9 dwelling units per acre, but again, the 12 cited by Growing Together. And the reason that I keep referring back to those two comprehensive plans, Places 2040 and to Growing Together, is because they used, in both cases, an objective strategy where they actually said, okay, how much land we have growing population, we've got this much land. If we have to accommodate that much growth, we're going to have densities that are going to enable us to do that. And so that I believe that strategy as a macro strategy is appropriate. And so I do think that those are numbers that are in the right range. So that's my overall. That was my overall. I know it's long, but that's my overall analysis of those zoning districts.
In your opinion, do the township's multifamily density regulations support the development of the new multifamily housing that will be needed in East Hempfield Township over the next 20 years?
No, for the reasons I just explained, because in order to achieve the densities that are going to be needed in order to accommodate not just growth, but also a range of housing types. You know, not just like if we just keep all these plans, you know, point to the fact that there's, you know, historically, there's been a lot of single family homes that were constructed in East Hempfield and, you know, nearby municipalities. But as times change and as demands change out there, in order to be able to continue to accommodate, you know, population growth, that there's going to have to be, and to, again, all incomes, right? So the notion of density is that it gives you more options to provide a range of housing types that, in theory, can cater to all people because you're varying in size. When the, you know, square footage, the quantity of square footage has a cost associated with it, and so when you have really big homes, they're obviously more expensive, and so you want to be able to to provide more efficient choices for people.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A17 for identification. Can you tell the board what that is?
That's just a big transfer. Yes, so again, a three-page exhibit that I prepared. It's entitled 5 dwelling units per acre is single family density. And the reason that I'm making this claim is that this is trying to illustrate that if you have, in the RM district, for example, you have a range of permitted uses, of permitted residential uses. And so there are single family homes permitted, there are single family detached, single family attached, what might be referred to as townhouses, twins, there, you know, a range of housing types, but all those are a form of single family home. They're either single family attached or single family detached. And so multifamily is a permitted use in name, but in reality, it's not really a clearly viable option from a real estate development you know, perspective. And the reason that I'm making this claim is what this shows is, if you just look at the bullet points down here, you know, I'm noting that 5 dwelling units per acre can be achieved with single family detached homes. And here, just doing the math quickly, there's 43,560 square feet in an acre. And if you divide that by 5, it's 80,712 square feet. So 8,700 square feet is a fairly generous size lot. And you know, in my practice, we frequently design these types of more, you know, traditional neighborhood, you know, development communities, all with lots that are, you know, 6,000 square feet, or, you know, sometimes even less. But those are 6,000, 6,500. Those are pretty common sizes. So 87 one 8,712 good sized lot. And you can easily achieve this. And then, of course, with if you were trying to do single family attached, townhouses or twins, those lots, again, in practice can be as small as 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. So in this first page, this example, again, this is a Google Earth image that I clipped out and have here. And this is the Village Brand at Miller Run. Now, in this case, this isn't even in the RM district. This is in the RL residential low zoning district. But these lots here are approximately a fifth of an acre when you scale them off. And then that's the image that's on the left of this page. And then to the right is just showing, an image of one of these houses here as seen from the street, just illustrating that, these are substantial single family homes. The next page, or the second page, this is an excerpt, again, Google Earth image, and it's this is taken from Veranda, which is in the RM zoning district in East Hempfield Township, and this is showing single family attached dwellings. So these are twins located on Grassy Way, and what the three large buildings that you see in the center of the image, each one of those is actually two dwellings. So if you draw a line down the center of one of those buildings, and then you measure between the curb lines and from the center of that line out to the center between the next two units where the property line would be, the lot area is for this street, they're about 6,000 square feet. And if you can just then turn to the next page, this for those three buildings that are right there in the featured on the previous page, that are right in the center of the aerial image. These are just street view images, also from Google Earth, which just show what half of one of those twins looks like. And again, these are substantial, single family attached homes. And I guess the other thing that is important to point out about this that I see is that Veranda, when you just look at it in terms of how it's framed with in the real estate world, and I guess its perception among other people, is that this is a really upscale residential community. And so if developers are able to provide this housing type solution with lot sizes that conform to 5 dwelling units per acre, then there's really no incentive for building multifamily housing, because this is more or less a no-brainer for them. So
On page 1 of A17,
Excuse me. Mr. Nagel, can we just take a 10-minute break, give everybody time to search?
absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Back on the record. Nagel, you and Mr. Cassidy still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. I just have a couple of questions about A17, Dr. Cassidy. On page 1, where you're saying the graphic that showed, that you said you clipped out of the Village Grand at Miller Run, that shows 10 homes. Those are single-family detached homes, correct?
Correct.
And you're saying that those are single-family detached homes achieved at 5 dwelling units per acre. So is it fair to say that the area that shows those 10 homes is more or less 2 acres?
Yeah, approximately. That's, again, I was using Google Earth if you're, and for anyone that's familiar with that software, it has, fairly accurate measuring capabilities, and we use it regularly in our practice. And so, so yes, this was something where I was able to scale this, and that's why it was a nice, simple example.
On the third page, you have a graphic at the top, which you, I think, described as a single-family home that's attached to another single-family home, as shown on the second page of A17.
That's correct. The image that you see on the top of the third page is half of one of those attached dwellings. So if you look to the right of what is the primary, residence that you see with the white picket fence in front of it, to the right of that, there is some siding that you can see up high in the roof, in the gable area of an adjacent house. And that's actually, those dwellings are actually attached. And if you look at the image in the lower portion of the page, although there is a tree that is obscuring a clear view, there you can a little more easily see that there is another, there's another dwelling, but they are attached in the middle.
So the one behind the tree in the bottom photo is attached to the one to the left that's not behind the tree.
Correct. And that was shown in the aerial image on the second page.
So just so I think you sort of explained it, but just so I understand fully, with all the stuff you just explained on exhibit A17, what's the impact of that explanation and analysis that you reviewed with respect to new multifamily development?
Well, as I was explaining, if you can achieve these types of residential dwellings, single family detached and single family attached, then there's really no economic incentive for building multifamily residential, because it's a whole combination, complicated combination of building codes, construction costs, financing, risk for people that are developing these things. And so the reason that to go to a multifamily dwelling type is typically because you are trying to achieve, or you're capable of achieving, a density that is higher than what you could achieve just by building single family homes. And so Otherwise, when you start talking about what's involved with, you know, multifamily, the development of multifamily dwellings, you quickly get into like code requirements that are in a whole different classification than what they are for single family homes. So there's even a different building code. So you have, you know, these types of single family homes, whether attached or detached, they can be built under what is called the International Residential Code. And as soon as you go to multifamily, you have to build under the International Building Code. And so the requirements in terms of everything from, you know, ADA requirements to, you know, worrying about fire prevention and, you know, egress and on and on and on, they just, you could immediately go into a whole different class. And so, single, you know, townhouses, single family, you know, attached and again, single family detached are a much, they're much more simple to construct. Typically, you're capable, just in terms of the raw structure, you know, forget about the finishes. I mean, you know, a house that has, you know, very expensive, you know, finishes interior is always going to be expensive to construct. When you're just talking about the structure, on a per square foot basis, it's, you know, it's much, you know, it's a much more efficient way to build in terms of the single family homes from a cost perspective, in terms of what the value that you're creating versus multifamily, which again is a much more intensive level of investment and has higher risk and everything else. So, so when people can build, so when people can achieve the maximum density that's available to them with single family homes, it's the no-brainer solution.
And you have a long history of working for municipalities and for developers, correct?
That's correct.
And in your work for developers, you've represented them both as an architect and as a land planner, is that fair?
Correct.
Have you seen this impact that you're talking about in the real world, in the work that you've done for developers?
Yes, I mean, in our practice, we provide, you know, a wide range of design services, and we design a wide range of building types. And in the case of residential, we are asked frequently to assess the potential for developing projects. And so we look at ordinances, we look at the site conditions, you know, we evaluate, you know, a number of factors. And when we are faced with densities that are in this range, then our clients typically end up building some form of single family home.
You testified earlier about some of the area bulk regulations in the RM zoning district, and you've reviewed those, correct?
Correct.
Do the area bulk regulations governing multifamily dwellings that are included in the RM zoning district regulations play a part in your analysis of this issue that we're talking about?
Yes, I mean, they just, so when we review ordinances and we're looking at potential for what can occur, we are looking at we take all of these things in collectively, and we say, okay, what are the limitations? So density, for example, is a big one, and we've been talking about that. But the next thing with the area bulk regulations, which, you know, are things like the maximum, you know, building footprint or building height, sometimes maximum building length, there's all sorts of things that you frequently find in ordinances. And, so we always take those into consideration.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A18 for identification. Can you explain what that document is?
Excuse me. Yes, this is, again, an exhibit that I prepared entitled, maximum multifamily building area in RN zoning district, 10,000 square feet. And, but the image is not from the RN zoning district, it's not even from East Hempfield Township. This again is a Google Earth image of the Crossings community located in Manheim Township. And I selected this example because it's nearby, but also because it's representative of what I would consider a contemporary, a project that meets contemporary, market standards, meaning that for potential residents, because part of this whole the whole thing of saying, well, will multifamily residential occur is, first of all, all these impediments, that work against it, you say, okay, that won't work. But if you get it down to a point where you can't provide what potential residents expect and want in the contemporary world, the project will fail. And so people won't build it because they're not going to build something that's not marketable, that they don't feel confident about. And so the Crossings, when you look at that project, you see the size and the scale of the buildings, and they're in this particular case, what I'm trying to illustrate is that the RM district, it has a maximum building area of 10,000 square feet for multifamily residential. And that, so down at the bottom of this, I'm quoting from the Township zoning ordinance, and this is the, from the definition section, 270-2.2 for building area. And it says, the total of areas taken on the horizontal plane at the average grade level of the principal building and all accessory buildings, exclusive of uncovered porches and stoops, awnings, terraces, and steps. And so when if you look at the image, there are three buildings that are highlighted in color. The one that is at the bottom of the image, portion of the building is covered in red. The other section is covered in yellow. The other two buildings are both all yellow. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that these are of the buildings that exist on this site. Those buildings range between, have a footprint that, in terms of meeting the building area definition, would be 14,000 feet and 22,000 square feet, just in terms of the footprint. And that this shows that 10,000 feet is not adequate, and you're 4,000 feet over if you even try to build the smallest building that they have out there. And these are 4-story buildings. So when you start talking about 3-story buildings and other different building typologies, again, in almost all cases, it's very, very challenging to create a contemporary multifamily building. And when I say contemporary, I'm not talking about how it looks, I'm saying something that meets contemporary market standards and all the current building codes and all the other requirements that you have to have in the world today, including being able to get it financed and everything else. So it's people in today expect that the communities in which they live are going to have services. They expect on-site property management in most cases. So if you know, your sink gets clogged, your dryer stops working, you know, there's somebody on site, you can call them and they come and take care of it. You can't provide those kinds of services if you're building, you know, little one-off projects here and there. So most of the buildings that that we see every day in practice are this scale and larger. So the 10,000 square feet is a unreasonable building area to apply to a multifamily residential building.
Is that especially, is that especially true if that's the size building that you allow in your most dense multifamily zoning district?
Yeah, it would be the case, it's the case in almost any circumstance. And not to go into a long deep dive on this, but like, just here's a classic example. If you build one of these buildings, you have to have two means of egress, so you need stair towers, right? You know, in both ends of the building. You're gonna have elevators, so the elevators are really expensive. So if you're gonna put an elevator in, it has to serve a certain number of units. You can't afford to put, you know, this, you know, $100,000, you know, elevator in and then only serve 3 units. It's not, it doesn't work. So, you know, you'd have to be charging people, you know, more rent than they can afford to pay. So in order to make all of these requirements and all of these things, you know, line up and make it feasible, there are certain, there become these sort of industry norms, if you will, that people recognize because that's what it takes to make it work economically and also just in terms of, again, meeting market demand in the current world.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't find an example where someone's actually built a 10,000 square footprint building at maybe a density of 5 dwelling units per acre, or does it?
It does not. There's always going to be, again, these sort of smaller scale one-off projects that they might have gotten some kind of a subsidy, or there might be something unique about the circumstance. We were talking earlier about infill opportunities in some of these small neighborhoods. So perhaps, you know, it just works out in terms of the land cost and everything else, that it's a viable option for a particular situation. But when you start talking about, you know, really trying to provide multifamily housing, you know, at the scale that is going to be required to provide for future population growth in the county and East Hempfield Township, that is not going to be satisfied, or that obligation is going to be, you know, achieved. Doing, you know, little project. So.
I'm showing you an exhibit I've marked A19 for identification. Can you identify that document?
Yes, this is another exhibit that I prepared. And it's entitled, maximum building height 35 feet. And so this is just, continuing, or reinforcing this, this point about the area bulk regulations. So it's one thing to say that, okay, there's the definition for building height, and so you should be able to, you should be able to meet it, right? But if you actually start calculating, how this is going to work, you quickly realize that there are a lot of, challenges here, and that it's, it basically doesn't work. So, in this case, the example is assuming, a three-story dwelling. And I say three-story because typically, 3 stories would be the minimum, height that you would have. Again, in terms of just, all the things I was talking about earlier in terms of, stairs and, all the construction costs associated with these buildings. 3 stories is, the point at which there's some, construction efficiency in terms of the economics of it. And so, and 4 stories is much more common, but in this case, we're just looking at 3. And so, so I just come down here, I enumerate under the heading sample calculation. And this just is working through, doing the math on how you would go about doing this. So I just made some basic assumptions. 3 stories, and you'll notice there's a little gray line at the very base of this. That's because you're gonna have a little foundation, and by code, you've got to be at least 8 inches, above grade. So, just assume for rounding per se, it's a foot. And then you've got 3 floors. Each floor, I have dimensioned here at 10 feet 8 inches. That's because that is the typical floor to floor depth that is used in the industry today. And when I say floor to floor, I'm not talking about you have a 10-foot-8 ceiling in your within your home. You have a 9-foot ceiling. You then have the balance of that depth is structure between your ceiling and the floor above you. And so you do 10-8 3 times plus the foundation, and round number, you're at 33 feet, and you don't even have a roof yet. And so
Look, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I'm sorry. You're saying 10-8 depth, but looking at the exhibit, I would think of that in terms of height. If that's just.
no, that is the height. I'm sorry. I'm talking when I say, sorry, I started talking in industry parlance, like I'm talking in the office. So we have we would say that yes, you have a floor to floor height of 10 feet 8 inches, and when we take that 3 times plus the foundation, it's approximately 33 feet, and then for a roof, the minimum slope typically for just using typical asphalt shingles and not getting into anything exotic, it's recommended to be a 4-12 pitch, because if it gets too shallow, you have moisture problems. And so in this case, I then assume that the building, typically these buildings are between 60 and 70 feet in depth. And, if you just average that out, it's going to, you do the calculation and you end up with an additional 10 to 11.5 feet of roof above the, above the 33 feet that we're already showing. So if you look on the right side of the image, there's a dimension line there that says 42 to 45 feet. And again, that will depend, this would be, the reason there's a range is because it would depend on the exact width of the building, 60 to 70 feet, okay? But that, that is showing, measuring to the peak, of the roof. And that is, being measured that way because if you then go back and look in the center of the page, and it's, ordinance section, 270-2.2, it's from the definition section of the East Hempfield Township ordinance. It's, the definition for building type in the RM district. And so, so it says, building height, for a single family detached dwelling, the vertical we're again talking about how we measure height here. The vertical distance from the average finished grade measured 6 feet out from the foundation to the median between the top of the eave and the peak of the roof, for both a hip and gable roof type. This is a gable roof type here. And so that's if you're doing a single family home. So if then it says, next sentence, for all other buildings, that would be multifamily residential, the vertical distance, from the average finished grade measured, 6 feet out from the foundation to the highest point of the roof. So what that means is that the way in which building height is calculated is more permissive for a single family dwelling than it is for a multifamily building. And multifamily buildings are generally much larger buildings, so it makes no sense. And so when you go back to this whole idea again of taking these area and bulk standards and looking at them in concert with the density limitations, you start to get into this, what we could, use the euphemism, carrots and sticks, which is that, there's a lot of sticks, there's a lot of impediments against developing multifamily residential building types, because you have density limitations, you've got these height limitations, you've got building area limitations, and yet in this case, if you're doing a single family detached dwelling, you get a little bit of a pass on the building height. And we've already said that you can achieve, the maximum allowable density with a single family building type. So I'm back to the point again of, well, if I'm looking at what my options are, there's a headwind for developing multifamily, and there's a much easier path, let's say, to achieve what your goals would be for a single family.
And the definition of building height from section 270-2.2 that's on A19, that's from the general definitional provisions in the zoning ordinance, correct? But you're saying it applies in the RM district?
Sure, I'll double check. Yes,
If, do you still have a copy of A20B up on the witness stand?
remember please. Yes, I do. Give me one moment, please. Lots of pieces of paper up here. Trying to
Understood.
Joe.
You said
Yes.
you do have a copy of A20B.
Got it.
Is essentially, is your testimony based on what you were just describing with exhibit A19? That for multifamily development, you really want to try to go up and achieve a greater density, so consistent with what you testified to before, you're using up less land. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
If you look at page 51, the first page of A20B, in the fourth heading that says limit large lot suburban development in rural areas. I think it's the third sentence. It says, reduce the rural portion of the county's total population growth by 3% and redirect that growth into UGAs, correct?
Correct.
Is the limitation on height that you've just testified about a factor that would inhibit or prevent your ability to achieve that kind of a goal?
Yes, again, all of these things add up to creating a circumstance where, again, I'm just use the RM district, but it's all four of the districts that I've referred to, that permit, multifamily residential. It's listed as a permitted use. But despite that it's listed as a use, there are no standards being provided for it that are different than the standards in terms of enabling it to occur. It's not, there are not standards that are being provided that enable it to occur more readily in these situations than single family homes. And the single family homes are actually much easier, it's much easier to achieve conformance with all these goals and still maximize density. So yes, it's listed as a use, but it's not frequently. I'll put it that way. I don't want to talk in absolutes. There's always going to be the one-off project. There's always going to be some reason why that little thing could happen over here and it couldn't happen over there. But when you talk about general conditions, it is these are impediments.
Dr. Cassidy, based on your testimony so far, do you have an opinion whether the township's provision for multifamily dwellings in its zoning ordinance at the densities and subject to the area and bulk regulations that apply to those types of dwellings that you've testified about satisfies the township's obligation to accommodate the development of adequate multifamily dwellings over the course of the next 20 years to address population growth that you've talked about?
I do have an opinion, and I do not believe that there is there's a strategy that bears out that the township can provide for, enough multifamily housing and a full range of multifamily housing, for all the people that would potentially be future residents. Existing future residents.
Putting aside for a moment the population growth that you've talked about as projected by the Lancaster County Planning Commission, as included in some of the other planning documents that you've testified about, is there already a housing shortage in Pennsylvania?
There is, there's a nationwide housing shortage, and that shortage, exists in Pennsylvania, it exists in Lancaster County. If anyone, if you're following the news in any form, it comes up constantly. Housing prices are exorbitantly expensive. You see articles talking about how, it's starting to change, there's now, intergenerational housing starting to be much more common, people, living with their parents and that sort of thing, because they can't afford. To buy a place, it's so expensive. And just recently, Governor Shapiro just has announced an initiative to spend $80 million to attack the Pennsylvania housing crisis. And while that sounds like a lot of money, I read it and I thought to myself, well, 80 million, he needs like 80 billion. It's gonna have to be a much bigger number. But the housing problem, again, it is a phenomenon of the period in time in which we live. And again, it's this combination of population growth, economics, art zoning. I mean, all over, there are initiatives everywhere now to try to abolish single family zoning. And it's because again, it's just there's not enough land to accommodate the growth for that people can afford, because not everybody can afford a big house. That's the bottom line.
Has Lancaster County developed a plan to deal with these housing demands and the population growth, including as evidenced in or recited in Places 2040?
I believe they have, and that's what I was explaining earlier, is that I think they have actually, they've done the math. And so, they've recognized there's this challenge of accommodating 100,000 people and by 2040, and they recognize that there's only so much land available. And so the only way that we can achieve that, like if you took every acre of land that was available, okay, fine, you can just keep building single family homes on whatever size lots, but you're quickly going to end up where all of the character zones and all of the things about our communities, all over the region, this is not an East Hempfield problem. This is a regional problem, okay? That you're just going to end up with a sameness. There will be no farmland left. There won't be, places that have unique characteristics, because we've just spread the same pattern of development across the entire landscape. So the only way we can ever be strategic and say, where should development go? Put it where the infrastructure is already, put it where the roadways are, save the farmland. We have to use density is a tool, And in this case, it's the best tool that exists to help solve the problem.
How could East Hempfield Township achieve that goal within its borders, in your opinion?
Well, again, currently, if you just look at the density standards that exist within the ordinance. They're in that, they're in that 5 range. There's, the 4 in CDC, 5 in the other 3 districts that I previously referred to. And there's also, the township does have a cluster provision within those that can be used. That cluster provision, we looked at that does in theory allow for 6 dwelling units per acre. We have looked at that as well and done some analysis. The way that provision works, it's based on a lot of individual site criteria that has to be evaluated. So it's going to vary on every single site in terms of how it's achieved. And it also has the requirement that you would you combine at least 2 residential types. So that means you can't just do all multifamily. You'd have to do, you could do 2 forms of single family even under that. But if you wanted to do multifamily, you'd have to combine it with some form of multifamily. And when you look at again, all the open space requirements and net outs and everything you have to provide in there, some of the samples that we did as, again, just as like test fits, if you will, is that we were determining that really the maximum achievable density that you would have for multifamily in those cases would be approximately 5.4 dwelling units per acre. So if you look at all of these districts and you say, okay, on the one hand, I've got CBC at 4, I've got the base density at 5, I've got a couple of properties where you might be able to do the cluster provision because it all has a minimum lot size. That if you start doing that, you're still back to net, you're in this 5 zone. 5.1, call it 5.4, it doesn't matter, doesn't move the needle. And so none of these densities are going to result in providing for the future housing needs of the township.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked 837 for identification. Did you identify that document?
One moment, please. Yes, this is an exhibit that my firm prepared. Is East Hempfield Township parcels with potential for residential uses that include multifamily residential. So if you look at this, it's a map of the entire township, and all of the zoning district boundaries are indicated on here. And there's a legend here under with the heading zoning districts. And then all the way down at the bottom, there's a separate legend. And in the gold, you'll see that the gold color is called out as parcels with potential for residential uses that include multifamily use. And what we did is using, again, geographic information systems, GIS, And also then going back and looking at aerial photography and other source data. We identified the parcels that fall into one of those 4 zoning districts that allows family residential. And we only show the ones in gold where that are either remain undeveloped or still have some development potential. So like if we looked at a site and we saw that there was still capacity there based on what the maximum zoning density would be allowed, you know, then we've taken that into account. But everything that is either already been built out, so to speak, you know, has not been included. And then just drawing your attention once more down to the legend at the bottom. There's a green asterisk there. It says potential for cluster development. You'll see there are 2 properties where that could occur, you know, potentially. And both of them are zoned RN, and one is large and the other is rather small. And then also outlined in green, and then with highlighted with a label, we just have a line around the Colebrook community site, just for reference on here in terms of its location. So what this shows is that if you take all of the parcels that are highlighted in bold and have this potential, this future development potential for multifamily housing, it is a total, those parcels collectively represent a total of 254.6 acres. And so that's the land we have to work with.
I'm showing you a document marked A21 for identification. Could you identify that?
Yes, this is the East Hempfield Township zoning map, which we downloaded from the township's website.
Does the township have a significant amount of land zoned for agricultural use?
It does. The area, the majority of the area situated north of Route 283, that generally very light green, almost gray tone on this map, is the agricultural zone. And this also, you know, generally is corresponding with the area, an area that is outside of what has been designated as the township's for the growth area.
The area that you're referring to as the agricultural zone on A21 on the township zoning map. You said light, very light green, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Is that most of the land to the north of, just tell me if I'm reading this wrong.
It's the land, it's most of the land north of Route 283. there are a few parcels in there that, are not. So that you can see a couple of other zoning districts there, but majority of that large block is, zoned for agriculture.
I'm gonna show you an exhibit marked A25 for identification. And that includes Article 3 zone regulations, correct?
That is correct.
And at the bottom of the first page of the 5-page excerpt from the township, East Hempfield Township zoning ordinance, it identifies section 270-3.2 agricultural zones, correct?
That's correct.
What does the township's zoning ordinance say about agricultural preservation?
So for the agriculture zone, this is section 270-3.2A, statement of intent to protect and promote agriculture in areas located outside of the East Hempfield designated urban growth area. The provisions of this zone have been designated to meet section 604, excuse me, 604, parentheses 3 of the municipality's planning code, which requires the zoning ordinance to be designed to preserve prime agriculture and farmland, considering topography, soil type, and classification, and present agriculture use. In order to preserve the agricultural and rural character of the area, public sewer and water utility services shall not be extended into the agriculture zone. And instead, each use within this zone will be serviced with on-lot sewer and water facilities.
What's the significance of the preservation of the ag zone per that statement of intent to the provision of multifamily dwellings that are needed over the next 20 years and beyond?
Well, it's twofold. You know, on the one hand, you essentially need public water and sewer in order to develop multifamily dwellings. And so just from a basic practical matter, that would be something that would say you definitely can, do that there. It's not a permitted use, and moreover, the intent is to preserve this portion of the township as a rural agricultural zone. And, it represents approximately 1/3 of the township's land area. And so in order to preserve that land, once again, we can't have the same kind of let's just call it low density zoning across the entire township, because you would use up all of the land over time, including the agricultural land. So if we want to have goals like preserving the agricultural land, then with the land that is available, we're going to have to utilize higher densities to achieve the necessary housing needs for existing and future residents.
When you're talking in terms of that land, which is to be preserved under chapter 27, section 3.2A that you refer to, you're referring to, if I look at A21, the land designated as the agricultural zone that should be preserved. Is that correct? Okay. Is,
And if I may, I mean, that again is a goal that is not only the township stated goal in the comp plan, but that is also completely consistent with the goals of Places 2040 and with Growing Together, which, you know, are looking at you know, where development should be focused, and saying that these types of areas that are still where there's still really viable agricultural production occurring, and which have, you know, great soils and all the other right conditions, they should be safeguarded.
is Colebrook's property, including its 342 multifamily dwelling units and its undeveloped 27 acres, located in both the Places 2040 designated urban growth area and within the township's designated urban growth area?
It is.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked A26 for identification. Could you identify that document, please?
Yes, this is an exhibit that I prepared, and it is showing an excerpt of the Places 2040 urban growth boundaries in the center of the image, but we have transposed the boundary of East Hempfield Township onto the outline of the of that central area that is the darkest orangish color in the center of the image.
So in other words, the black outline is showing East Hempfield Township, and that's overlaying the urban growth area that's from the Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, Places 2040, is that right?
Yes, and the purpose of this is just to illustrate that when you look at the urban growth area that the county has identified for the entire county, that East Hempfield is, you know, situated, you know, right at the core of all of this, with the exception of the lands that we were just discussing a moment ago, which are zoned for agriculture and which should be preserved. But everything that's not in that area, the balance of the township is situated within the urban growth area.
Are you saying that the area that's in the urban growth boundaries is already meeting that 9+ dwelling per acre, or is that what it should be, 9? Well,
That is what is being recommended by places 2040 within the dark orange color.
be all 9, 9
Well,
or
to
2.
to achieve an average density of 9 dwelling units per acre. And so again, since there's already a lot of land which is has been developed at a much lower density, there's going to have to be some areas where there's densities that are well above the 9 dwelling units per acre in order to achieve the average of 9 that is recommended.
Thank you.
Dr. Cassidy, based on A26, is it your opinion that with respect to the preservation of the agricultural land in East Hempfield Township that you were talking about earlier, using A21, the zoning map of East Hempfield Township, that the county, based on this map, agrees with East Hempfield Township that agricultural area, that area in East Hempfield that's zoned agricultural should be preserved?
That's correct, it's consistent.
I'm showing you a document marked A27 for identification. It's an excerpt from the municipality's planning code, similar to the one we talked about before, a different section. At the top, it has the statute site 53 PS section 10604. Is this what you would be familiar with as section 604, what we might refer to as section 604 of the municipality's planning code?
It is.
And are you familiar with this section of the municipality's planning code?
Yes, this is, this section outlines the provisions of zoning ordinances that shall be used.
What does this section of the MPC say about the provision of housing and the preservation of agricultural land?
Well, so if you go down to number 3, number 3 is to preserve prime agriculture and farmland considering topography, soil, and classification and present use. And that's consistent with what we just saw in the township's zoning provision for the agriculture district. And then number 4 is to provide for the use of land within the municipality for residential housing of various dwelling types, encompassing all basic forms of housing, including single-family and 2-family dwellings, and a reasonable range of multifamily dwellings in various arrangements, mobile homes and mobile home parks, provided, however, that no zoning ordinance shall be deemed invalid for the failure to provide for any other specific dwelling type.
In your opinion, does East Hempfield Township zoning ordinance provide for that?
I don't believe it does. And that's because, as I have explained, while there are, you can say in name that that multifamily housing is permitted in various districts, there are not the other supporting standards in terms of density and area and bulk regulations that would actually lead to it occurring in reality.
And it's your testimony, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's a problem for subsection 4 of section 604 of the MPC, but it's also a problem with respect to subsection 3 of section 604 of the MPC. Is that right?
Well, section 3 is talking about the preservation of the farmland, and so to the extent that can be achieved, that's not over time, in order to make sure that that land is preserved and doesn't eventually succumb to being, developed, because again, lower densities just, spread out all over the place. Then the two are interconnected.
Mr. Chairman, can we go off the record for a moment?
Sure. Judy, we're going off the record. I'm just the chairman. Cheryl runs the meeting. The May meeting is scheduled for the 16th. That would be the third Thursday. Sure. Agree with everybody, this paper?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Then with that, as I said, we'll reconvene that meeting, this meeting that night. We'll pick up with Dr. Cassidy as the witness, go to questions, and then correct. I don't think there's anything else. I need to add anything this time?
I don't believe so.
Okay, anybody have any questions or anything?
No.
With that, and this meeting stands in recess until May.
Thank you for
everybody.
Thank you for your time.